In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the best executed races in the careers of some elite sprinters and comparing them to some of the worst executed races of their careers. I'll also be factoring in the context of each race, since a poorly executed race at a small early season meet isn't as substantial as a bad race around championship time when the athlete should have everything in place to perform to their best. Starting with the 5th fastest 100 meter sprinter ever, Justin Gatlin, the race I've chosen as his worst executed race was his 10.23 performance in the semi-final of the 100 meters at the 2011 World Championships, a race where he finished in 4th place. Seeing as he had a season's best of 9.95 going into the championship, he would have had expectations to at least make the final. In this race, Gatlin is in the lane next to Kim Collins, who was in some of the best form of his life at that championship, and with Collins catching a lightning start, he already separated a few meters from Gatlin and was running fully upright while Gatlin was transitioning out of his drive phase. This deficit may have caught Gatlin off guard, or caused him to alter his race execution, because he looks quite stiff when he gets into his running, with slower leg turnover than you would expect from an athlete of his caliber. In contrast, Nesta Carter also gets beaten out of the blocks by Kim Collins, but he is able to make back a chunk of the deficit to finish second without ever looking like he had to push for his top gear, since he looked very relaxed as soon as he came out of his drive phase. Gatlin finished the race in 43 strides, but you can see from 10 meters out, he's already leaning forward trying to reach for the line, which hurts his form even more, but he was already too far behind to get into a qualifying spot. For Gatlin's best executed race, I've chosen his personal best race of 9.74, which he ran in Doha in 2015. He also ran 9.75 twice in that same season, so he was executing his races consistently well that season. In the race in Doha, he beat Mike Rogers out of the blocks, then pulled away even further as the race progressed, finishing the race in 43 strides like his race in Daegu, except in Doha his turnover appeared faster and his movements looked much more efficient, like his force was being directed into the track to a far greater extent. Gatlin had an unofficial 60 meter split of 6.35 in this race, covering the final 40 meters in 3.39 seconds. For Tyson Gay's worst executed race, I've chosen his 2012 Paris Diamond League race, which he actually won in a fast time of 9.99, but given that he ran 9.86 a couple of weeks prior, I feel like this race was below his capabilities at the time. The thing that stood out to me about this race is just how poor his start was, since he looks to get beaten out of the blocks by Lemaitre next to him, who wasn't known for his starting ability. He does pick up speed by 30 meters and eventually takes the lead over Gatlin right before the line, but when looking at all of Tyson Gay's wins where he left himself lots to do after a poor start, I think this race is the most extreme example. In terms of Tyson Gay's best executed race, the two options that stand out are his 9.69 and 9.71 performances, and I chose his 9.71 performance because when wind adjusted, it's his fastest ever race. Tyson got a pretty good start in this race and built on it with his amazing top end speed, but arguably the best performance of his life was only good enough for second place on that day. For Asafa Powell's worst executed race, I've chosen his 2007 World Championship final performance, where he entered the final as the favourite to win, as he was the world record holder who had ran 9.77 on 3 occasions. Powell started the race with a trademark explosive start, and looked to be a step ahead of his number one rival Tyson Gay at the 30 meter mark, but Tyson managed to close the gap, and when Powell felt him on his shoulder, he seemed to tense up and run in a much stiffer motion than he would in races where he didn't feel the same level of pressure from someone catching up to him. If we take the first 40 meters of the race, Powell appeared to execute quite well as he usually would, even if it wasn't world record pace, but from 50 to 70 meters is where he lost the most ground to Tyson. After 80 meters, it looked like Powell knew the race was over and he slowed down more, even starting his chest lean 10 meters out from the line while he was still in the position to take the silver medal, but missed out on the silver medal to Derek Atkins due to his strong deceleration approaching the line. For Asafa Powell's best executed race, I've chosen a race that many people will consider to be the best ever demonstration on how to run the 100 meters from start to finish, and that is his 9.72 personal best run from Lausanne in 2008. Powell got off to a great start in this race, which was often the case for him in Golden League meets, and by 40 meters he had established himself as being clear of the rest of the pack. He came through 60 meters in a blistering time of 6.33, and he maintains textbook form all the way through the line with no leaning or slowing down early, and you can see from his face just how relaxed he was while running. For Yohan Blake's worst executed race, I've chosen his 2021 Olympic semi-final performance where he ran 10.14 and finished in 6th place. Something I noticed in this race is that right out of the blocks he didn't look to be controlling his movements well, and it actually looked like his torso was bent too far downwards towards the track, which isn't what you want when trying to maintain your balance and set up a good drive phase. Andre de Grasse, who isn't known as a strong starter, beat him to the 10 meter mark, which isn't something you'd expect with Blake being the heavier and more powerful athlete. Blake did actually look to be well in the race around the 40 meter mark, but from that point on he started losing ground to his competitors, and it looked like he exerted too much energy trying to make his mark early in the race after an unbalanced exit from the blocks. When the race was getting away from him after 60 meters, he looked quite tense and heavy as his form appeared to break down, and he said in an interview after the race that he couldn't push off properly in the last part of the race, and when he seen people passing him he couldn't react. He said that he was in great shape before the race, but his leg was plaguing him, which hampered his performance. For Blake's best ever performance, I've chosen his personal best race, which was his 9.69 run in Lausanne in 2012. For Blake, this was pretty much a flawless race from start to finish, and he had one of the best sprinters in the world racing beside him to give a comparison of just how fast he was moving. When you look at Blake's first 4 steps, he gets his foot back onto the ground extremely quickly, and he takes the lead early in the race, getting ahead of everyone else by 30 meters. Young Yohan Blake usually ran quite a balanced race, where he would come on stronger towards the end, but the fact he was leading the race so early showed he had the potential to do something special with Tyson Gay chasing him. From 30 to 70 meters is where you would expect Tyson to try close the gap on Blake, but with Blake in this kind of form, Tyson just had no chance of catching him, and the race was effectively over as soon as Blake took a commanding lead. What makes this race even more impressive is that it wasn't ran with a tailwind, but with a very slight headwind of 0.1, making it the fastest race into a headwind ever, and many will consider it to be the most impressive feat of 100 meter sprinting by an athlete not named Usain Bolt. Speaking of Bolt, for the final segment of this video with Usain Bolt's worst ever 100 meter performance, I've made a shortlist of 3 races which include his 2015 World Champs semi-final, his 2017 World Champs final, and his 2010 Diamond League final. For the 2015 World Championship semi-final, Bolt made a mistake coming out of the blocks and stumbled within his first few steps, but he managed to regain his balance and make up the deficit on those who were leading the race with enough composure to even look across before crossing the line in first place. For the last 20 meters of the race, it didn't even look like Bolt was trying his hardest, and he still managed to win, so I can't consider it his worst executed race. For the 2017 World Champs final, Bolt did look like he was tightening up from 60 meters onwards, and you could see the grimace on his face as he was trying to close the gap on Coleman, but the 9.95 that he ran was equal to his season's best, so it wasn't like he way underperformed based on the condition he was in, but it's debatable if he could have beaten Gatlin's 9.92 if he wasn't straining so much in the final 40 meters. This means that the race I've chosen as Usain Bolt's worst performance was his 2010 Diamond League final loss to Tyson Gay, where he got beaten out of the blocks by Tyson and was never able to claw back the deficit. Tyson finished this race in a time of 9.83, meaning Bolt lost by 0.14 seconds with a finishing time of 9.97, which was much slower than what he should have been capable of that season. Going into that race, Bolt had ran 3 other races in 9.8 that season, with his season's best being 9.82. Tyson said in an interview that he knew he couldn't let Bolt get a step ahead of him, so he strategized to try beat him out of the blocks and hold on from there, a tactic which ended up working in practice. We had seen Bolt catch up to opponents who beat him out of the blocks before, and in Stockholm 2 years prior, he almost caught up to Powell, who caught a rocket start against him, but Bolt appeared to ease off a few meters out from the line. Against Tyson though, Bolt had no answers past the halfway point in the race because Tyson had the top end speed to hold off any attempt he would make to close the gap. The footage from this race isn't the highest quality to assess running form with, but you can see Bolt giving up once he reaches the final 10 meters. For Usain Bolt's best executed race ever, it is of course his 9.58 world record run at the 2009 World Championships final in Berlin. There isn't really much more analysis that needs to be done on this performance, but given that he ran what was the fastest ever 60 meter split at the time, as well as the fastest ever final 40 meter split, I think this is as close as you can get to a perfect race, since you would even struggle to beat this time by adding up the career best splits of the other all-time great 100 meter sprinters, a topic which may be worth delving into in future videos.